January 1945, Boxted Airfield, Essex, England. A pale winter sun rose over the frozen concrete as a thin crust of frost coated the hardstands of the 56th Fighter Group. Known across Europe as the Wolf Pack, these American pilots had spent 2 brutal years ruling the skies, destroying more enemy aircraft than any other U.S. fighter group of the war. They had faced everything the Luftwaffe could throw at them, and beaten it. But on this bitter morning, something different rolled onto the tarmac. It was sleeker. Faster. Far more dangerous. The aircraft was the Republic P-47M Thunderbolt, a machine designed with a single obsession: speed. It would become the fastest Allied piston-engine fighter to ever see combat in World War II. And its arrival marked the final evolution of American prop-driven airpower. The urgent need for speed. The story began months earlier, in late 1944, as Allied commanders grew increasingly concerned. Germany, though retreating on all fronts, had unleashed a terrifying new generation of weapons. The jet-powered Messerschmitt Me 262, the high-performance Focke-Wulf 190D-9, and the deadly V-1 flying bombs were pushing the limits of speed beyond what existing Allied fighters could reliably counter. The message was clear: America needed something faster. Republic Aviation turned to its legendary chief engineer, Alexander Kartveli, with a direct order: build the fastest piston-engine fighter the world had ever seen. What emerged was the P-47M. Engineering at the edge. The P-47M was a radical refinement of the already formidable Thunderbolt. It featured a boosted Pratt & Whitney R-2800-57C engine, an uprated turbo-supercharger, aerodynamic refinements across the airframe, reduced weight, and increased fuel flow. In official U.S. Army Air Forces tests, the aircraft reached a staggering 473 miles per hour. No Thunderbolt had ever moved like this. And very few prop-driven fighters, of any nation, ever would. But the speed came at a cost. Early deliveries were plagued with problems. Engines surged unpredictably. Power dropped without warning. At extreme altitude, the aircraft felt unstable and unforgiving. Most fighter groups wanted nothing to do with it. Only one unit accepted the challenge. The Wolf Pack takes control. The 56th Fighter Group volunteered. Their commander, Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke, personally flew the new Thunderbolt on a punishing high-altitude test. When he returned, stiff from cold and exhausted, he issued a simple verdict: "We'll make this airplane work. And when we do, nothing will outrun it." The Wolf Pack's pilots and ground crews began an unofficial test program of their own. They experimented relentlessly. Adjusting oil systems, boost pressures, propeller governors, and fuel mixtures. Week by week, they transformed the unstable prototype into a deadly, high-speed interceptor. Across the front lines, the Luftwaffe was gathering its remaining strength for a final stand. Soon, the P-47M would meet them head-on. First blood. February 1945, Western Germany. The 56th Fighter Group was assigned to escort a massive 8th Air Force raid targeting the industrial heart of the Ruhr. German radar detected the incoming bomber stream, and squadrons of FW-190D9s and Bf-109s scrambled to intercept. For months, these aircraft had relied on speed to strike and escape. Allied fighters struggled to catch them. This time was different. At 8:43 a.m., cruising near 27,000 feet, Major George Bostwick of the 63rd Fighter Squadron spotted a formation of FW-190D9s lining up for an attack on the B-17s. The Doris were fast, over 430 miles per hour. But Bostwick pushed his throttle forward. The turbocharger screamed. The P-47M surged ahead. Climbing through thin winter air, Bostwick accelerated toward 470 miles per hour, closing the gap with shocking ease. At 8:46, he dove into the attack, unleashing all 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns. One FW-190 rolled away, attempting to dive clear, but the Thunderbolt kept gaining. Seconds later, black smoke poured from the German fighter. The first confirmed P-47M air-to-air kill had been scored. Moments later, Lieutenant Walter Gresham intercepted a formation of Bf-109s, accelerating so rapidly that he overshot his own wingman. A short, controlled burst forced the German leader to bail out. For the first time, the Luftwaffe's speed advantage had vanished. Challenging the jet age. March 1945, near Kassel, Germany. Germany's final hope now rested on the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. Capable of more than 540 miles per hour, it could slash through bomber formations and escape almost untouched. Catching one in level flight was nearly impossible. But the Americans had identified a weakness. During takeoff and landing, the Me-262's jet engines produced slow, unstable thrust. On March 5, a flight of P-47MS from the 61st Fighter Squadron spotted a lone Me-262 struggling to climb after a failed attack. Captain Gerald Johnson reacted instantly, pushing his Thunderbolt into a steep dive, exceeding 500 miles per hour, right at the edge of structural limits. The aircraft shuddered violently. But it held. Johnson opened fire. Tracers struck the jet's right engine, which erupted into flames. The Me-262 disintegrated before its pilot could recover. A piston-engine fighter had just destroyed a jet, and the kill was fully confirmed. A week later, Lieutenant Vernon Richards repeated the feat, catching another Me-262 moments after takeoff and forcing it into a fatal crash landing. The Wolf Pack became one of the very few Allied units to claim multiple jet kills. The end of the Luftwaffe. April 1945, Central Germany. The German Air Force was collapsing. Fuel shortages, shattered airfields, and relentless Allied pressure left only fragments of once elite units still flying. Yet squadrons from JG-26, JG-2, and JG-301 continued to launch their final FW-190D9s and Bf-109K4s into combat. The aircraft they feared most was the P-47M. On April 11, during a massive strike near Leipzig, German fighters attempted a last desperate attack on the bomber stream. They never reached it. The 56th Fighter Group was already above them, and faster. Major Bostwick claimed another kill. So did Lieutenant Francis Pinky O'Neill. By the final days of April, organized German resistance in the air had effectively ended. Legacy. When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, the 56th Fighter Group fielded nearly 80 P-47Ms, forming the fastest operational piston-engine fighter force in the world. The P-47M represented the absolute peak of American piston-engine engineering. The fastest U.S. propeller fighter to see combat. A reliable counter to the FW-190D-9. One of the only piston fighters with confirmed Me-262 kills. Its combat career was short. The jet age arrived too quickly. And it never gained the fame of the Mustang. But among aviation historians, the P-47M remains one of World War II's most underrated fighters, a final proof that even at the very end of the war, American engineering could still out-accelerate and out-innovate its enemies when it mattered most.